Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And there was a recent update to the 9.0.5 PTR build, particularly for rogues when it comes to Covenant abilities. And I also wanted to go over some of the other very notable changes to Covenants moving into patch 9.0.5 for other classes as well. So if you were maybe getting bored of your Covenant or interested in switching or potentially just wanting to follow what is considered to be meta, or going to be a strong pick, I'm going to be providing that information so that you can then make that decision and give you my opinion as well to help that process. So let's just get started. The first big Covenant change coming through here for 9.0.5 that I thought was notable was for Druids. The Adaptive Swarm is getting a 5% buff to its periodic effectiveness. This is making it a bit stronger, particularly in PvP for all Druids. In PvE, its ability to compete with area of effect healing is just non-comparable. So this is almost, in my mind, always going to be a PvP pick. But a lot of people have been asking me, particularly for Balanced Druid, can you play Necrolord? Can I run Cycle of Life and Death? Can I play with dots? I think that in 9.0.5 with Shadow Resistance Aura disappearing, maybe potentially playing with Shadow Priests and Warlocks and trying to run this build is something that I'm curious to do as well. But 5% is not massive. It's not so dramatic that I think that, oh my God, every Boomkin's going to be doing this, but it is making me a little bit more intrigued in trying it. I wouldn't recommend it personally for Boomkin, but as a Resto Druid, you're very happy to see this. As a Feral Druid, maybe you want to run a Feral Frenzy build and run with bleeds. This does also open that up to the table, but Convoke and Kyrion's burst damage in PvP appear to be more desirable at the moment. So my only real recommendation for this change would be Resto Druids, stay with what you're doing. Boomkins, maybe a Cycle of Life and Death build. But now moving forward, we're going to be looking at, I believe, Demon Hunter. This was a Covenant ability, the Necrolords for Demon Hunter, that initially I was like, this is just not going to work. It was like call in a demon, and then you have to kill the demon, and then you have to stand in a puddle, and it was just too complicated, too difficult to actually pull off. So it's been completely redesigned. And now what will happen is when you're attacking people, you'll randomly summon a demon into the fight. When that demon gets close, you can think of it like a Baneling in StarCraft, or just like this demon bomb. It's going to run in, and then when you use Throwglaive, you can kill it instantly with Throwglaive, and it'll blow up, dealing damage and healing you for a lot of your maximum health. So 30% of your maximum health. That's going to make you very durable. A 30% heal really depends on the proc chance as to whether or not this could be amazing as a solo player as a Demon Hunter. I'm thinking like Battlegrounds. If you can run in and you're just procking demons and you're just popping them and they're healing you to full, and they're doing a significant amount of damage, this could be really fun for a self-sustain build. However, the initial burst damage and kind of ease of use of the hunt, and obviously the visual kind of amazingness of the hunt from Night Fae Demon Hunter and PvP makes me think that you're likely going to still want it. And then again, its AoE component competing with Venthyr Demon Hunter and competing with even Kyrian Demon Hunter, although Vengeance is getting nerfed. But we'll have to wait and see. This is kind of a wait and see. It seems kind of cutesy. And I'm always worried about things that are cutesy not actually working out. But a 30% heal is a lot. So if you're a solo PvP Demon Hunter player, I could see this providing you a lot of sustainability in Battlegrounds. But I wouldn't say like jump ship just yet with this one. We'll have to wait and see more testing. And of course, this is PTR, so things are subject to change. Maybe it ends up getting buffed more, but it's something to keep an eye on. Now moving forward, we're going to be looking at Priest, particularly the Night Fae. I know a lot of priests are running Night Fae in Mythic Plus at the moment. Not a ton in PvP. I think almost exclusively every priest plays Venthyr in PvP. However, I was considering if you're a healing priest, right? And you're not running, Jungle Cleave or Rogue Mage, you're not running these aggressive kind of comps. You're running maybe a caster comp or a melee cleave comp, like I've been playing Enhancement Shaman Warrior or Retribution Warrior, or if maybe you're Holy Priest and you're playing with casters like Elemental Shaman. I was thinking that this wouldn't be that bad of a pickup even before it was buffed here, it's getting buffed 5%. Your fairies on a target will now grant 15% damage reduction, which is very substantial. Cooldown recovery, I think it's not really too much consequence in PvP, and then some extra damage as well from the Wrathful Fairies. And the Conduit is getting buffed, so you'll leave a copy of their fairy when they leave the target of 80% of the initial value. So, I mean, I can't do the math here in my head. Probably should have done it before the video, but 80% of 15% damage reduction is still quite substantial. I'd say, what is that, at least around 10, maybe above 10% damage reduction, just lingering on the target. I've been considering swapping, but I still love mind games in PvP. This makes it more useful in PvE, obviously, and that kind of support utility role as the priest, if you want to fulfill that as a Night Fae, is going to be enabled even further. But if you're struggling and you're running those Melicles and caster comps as a priest, this could end up becoming a more viable option for you in PvP. Or if you still just like the mind games of PvP, stay with it. But if you're a PvE player and you want to run this for efficiency, it may also work in PvP better now as a result. Moving forward, we've got Hunters. Now, Hunters are getting buffed on Necrolords and on Venthyr. Death Chakram is going to do 15% more damage, and Flayed Shot's duration is increased. It's free, and it will also increase the damage of your next kill shot by 25%, along with some legendary buffs to Hunter. So, interesting for single target situations. Really tough to compete in AoE when it comes to either the Night Fae or the Kyrian Hunter Covenant abilities. They're AoE spells, so when there's AoE, they're doing really good, whereas Flayed Shot doesn't really do too hot in those situations. But in PvP, maintaining it now being free, a higher duration, and maybe pumping up some big kill shots could be pretty exciting to try out. You also gain access to the Door of Shadows for mobility. And Necrolord also has 15% damage buff as well, which could be substantial for single target damage, landing trap, and then going for burst damage with it a bit more frequently than the Resonating Arrow. However, the way that Hunter feels, at least in PvP, is that when Resonating Arrow is down, they're actually capable of killing something. When Resonating Arrow isn't available, not really acknowledging their existence. They're just not too useful at the moment in terms of damage output for Hunters. So I am curious to see if these two Covenant options, if anyone ends up switching to them, or if they just stick with the Resonating Arrow. Again, the Resonating Arrow or the Night Fae Covenant ability will likely still work out better in PvE, at least in dungeon play, where trash is important. But if there's a lot of single target boss situations, then Flayed Shot could end up rising to the top. On to the next one, which is going to be Warriors, and this is the one I think a lot of players were looking at originally. Much like the Demon Hunter, I was like, there's no way anyone picks this. It's just too hard to use, too long of a cooldown. I was like, put a banner on the ground, stand in it, very minor effects. Now instead, the banner will be on your back, so you'll move with the banner. You'll get 400 mastery, which is, again, comparable to the initial mastery levels of Pelagos, which was dominating everything as a Covenant abilities. You'll also get 30% movement speed increased to you and two of your nearest allies, and you will not be able to be slowed. But the cooldown is 2 minutes. Although it is getting reduced from 3 to 2, 2 minutes is still a really long time. At least when it comes to PvP. Now in PvE and in rated battlegrounds, providing a 400 mastery buff to a Boomkin or something like that, and also yourself for damage is going to be massive. Sprinting in allies as well in raid situations and battlegrounds is going to be, I think, stupendous. Maybe even in Mythic Plus. I mean, getting to maybe a warrior is even more desirable in there if they can drop this banner down for a Fire Mage Combustion. This might open the table for your viability across PvE and battlegrounds, but in a solo arena, I'm still struggling to see how it'll be better than Venthyr. It's just Condemned does so much damage and provides you some mobility from Death Sentence, and they're buffing the legendary that buffs your Mortal Strike after executing. So to me, I think if you're like a hardcore arena player, you're still likely going to want to remain Venthyr. But it does open your options here, and maybe you can make this work if you play with Enhancement Shaman or Balance Druid or Ret Paladin. You drop this down, sprint everything in with a massive mastery boost. If they're also running like a Kyrian Boomkin or a Kyrian Ret Paladin and they activate their Covenant ability, they're getting mastery from Pelagos. You're granting them mastery. There's potential for some really big hard-hitting crits with a build like this. You also, as a lot of people are anticipating Affliction Warlock to be better, you can counteract that legendary that provides that constant slow, right, by removing it and sprinting your allies. So there could be some usefulness to this legendary or to this Covenant ability as well. But I think this is going to be more notable in PvE environments. And Warrior, I think, needed some help there, but it could be kind of cheeky in PvP, especially Battlegrounds. Now we get to the big ones. We're going to be looking at Rogue, and Flagellation for Venthyr was one, again, where I was like, this doesn't seem like it was done. It wasn't, the spell wasn't completed or something. When I was looking at it on beta, it didn't seem like it was going to work out. And it looks like finally now it's coming to a point where it's like, okay, I can understand how this works. It's going to cost no energy now. It's going to be a lower duration, but it will grant you haste immediately with no secondary activation. So it's just straightforward, just bang, damage and haste. And it's a lot of damage. It's been increased by 270%. And then additional damage from spending combo points will be increased by 160%. Deals damage one time upon use rather than 3. So you get a big eviscerate hit on top of the flagellation. And then you can also cause more scars with conduits, which will then allow you to get more haste and more damage output with your combo points. So I'm very interested to see this, because what happened was everybody was Kyrian. Then they nerfed Echoing Reprimand in PvP, and it was gone. Now I was like, where do we go? I was like, I guess we're going to go Night Fae. Sepsis is okay. It does an all right amount of damage. You get some defensive bonus. You get the Vulp and Shapeshift. But reading some of these Rogue Covenant changes, I mean, this looks like it could hit really hard, especially for Subtlety Rogues, for the Mastery benefits. And I'm curious to see how it competes, because Rogues are also getting another Covenant change, which we'll move into right now, for Necrolord. So Rogues went from this one where I was like, yeah, we're kind of picking the least of the worst in terms of options, to, okay, now there's these two that are like, what is happening, right? So if you're a Rogue that was just kind of following some kind of script on like, well, these Rogue players are playing this, and I'm just going to do what they're doing, I feel like it's going to be a lot more challenging to figure it out. I mean, look at this change to Necrolord Rogue. And Necrolord Rogue was a Covenant in the beta that was just nuts. Everyone was like, what, permanent dot, it's doing insane damage. It was completely out of control, and then they ended up just hacking away at it and almost completely getting rid of it. But now it seems like they're going back on that a little bit. Its initial damage, Serrated Bone Spike's initial damage, is going to be increased by 300%. They fixed an issue that prevented its initial damage from critting, so now it can crit. Serrated Bone Spike now grants 1 combo point plus 1 per active Bone Spike after it strikes a target. So if you got 3 of them out, you'll get 3 combo points. Serrated Bone Spike no longer refunds a charge and gets removed when the target is healed to full. So the element of like healing the Rogue to full and removing your bleed, it will be gone, which is an interesting change, because in a way it would have been almost like it would have been too strong if it did that, because you could just hit people with a 300% increased initial hit whenever it was removed. I think they explain that later on. That's why they're removing that. However, it now means that the dot is just going to last infinitely, especially in rated arenas and even some battleground situations. But now Serrated Bone Spike will only be removed if the target leaves combat. So this design intention is to try and get the bleed onto multiple targets. And then in PvP, obviously, they don't want it getting constantly removed, so the Rogue is just spamming this massive hit. Makes a lot of sense, but it still is quite a massive hit. It's a low cooldown, and with the permanent dot effect, I'm curious to see if we see, Rogue Warlock. Everyone's still talking about Warlock, right? By being able to put ranged bleeds onto multiple targets to assist the Warlock, providing stun lock from Subtlety Rogue, maybe even a little bit of assassination. By being able to generate so many combo points, it should be easier to maintain ruptures on multiple targets. However, Subtlety's ability to stun multiple targets and peel for the Warlock, I think, would be a bit more important. But I'm curious to see, because now basically the Rogue Covenants are all coming down to which one hits the hardest, right? That's, in my mind, Echoing Reprimand hit the hardest. Everyone was playing it, and this is in PvP. And it got nerfed, didn't hit the hardest. Now Sepsis sort of hits the hardest. Okay, but now here Venthyr and Necrolord are getting buffed. So which one's going to hit the hardest? And we need to find out which ones are going to hit the hardest, because that's really all of them are. They do damage. They can provide some sort of combo point utility, but the utility effects on them are so minor to the point where it really just matters about the flat damage. I mean, think about every Covenant ability, right? Why is it good? It hits you really hard. I'm struggling to think of a Covenant ability, at least in PvP, that isn't good just because it hits you really hard. Is there really anything? Mind Games hits you really hard. Chain Harvest hits you really hard. Divine Toll hits you really hard. Convoke the Spirits hits you really hard. Condemn hits you really hard. Ancient Aftermath of Shockwave from Nightfare Warrior hits you really hard. What exactly? This basically is the main determining factor for a Covenant ability in PvP is, does it hit hard? Which one hits the hardest? So now it's a bit of a war between Venthyr and Necrolord. So as a rogue player, you really want to pay attention to these covenants. I am almost wondering if you want to anticipate these changes at all. So if you're not doing anything in particularly, maybe all your friends aren't playing or something, and you just want to get ready for the next patch where the next hype train comes on, where everybody comes back to the game. Usually, you could re-roll to Necrolord now, level it up, get through the process, right? And maybe even then switch to Venthyr, level it up, so you're grinded through your renown. And then the only thing you need to switch to is that week reset and the couple quests that it makes you do when you switch. That way you have all the covenants unlocked. You can switch to them with that weird time barrier. But these changes are changes that I feel like were changes that they said they wouldn't do because they seem so massive, right? Like a 300% damage increase. They said they wouldn't buff covenants, so you felt like you made the wrong choice. But it's kind of feeling like that for Rogue. Although at the same time, Rogue kind of needed it because Rogue's Covenant abilities were just... either they were like this one, godlike to begin with and gutted, or just not really relevant. So I'm curious to see where it goes. Regardless, let me know in the comments down below your thoughts. What Covenant are you going to be changing to, if you're going to be changing at all? Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all the changes here. I'm doing my best to be a resource. And other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. I will see you in the next one.